Ivy Valentine subscribes to Mark Yoon, so should you. Enjoy your treat!
Guest characters are a good way to cross-promote other productions, and they're a good way to actually get the game that we're actually trying to promote into the hands of people that are invested in those franchises and not necessarily yours. This is like the main goal of guest characters in Soul Calibur. Every other game is a little bit different when it comes to how they utilize guest characters. I will make a full video on what criteria Soul Calibur actually uses for their guest characters. I did one a while ago, but I do want to update that, so that'll be on this weekend's video. But I just want to go into this also saying that the criteria that they match is what I'm using. That's usually main characters or protagonists of games that are coming out around the similar time so that they can cross-promote each other. And it's usually only video game characters. They don't usually delve into anything else unless there's additional funding going into the project, as we see with Soul Calibur 4 being funded by Lucas Games, and that's why we got all the Star Wars stuff in it. And the same thing goes for everything else. It's just depending on funding, who funds it. But if we're going back by Bandai Namco publishing it and it being funded the traditional way with Soul Calibur 7 as it was with 6, then we're probably going to be going by these actual criteria. I think guest characters are important, let's just say that, for Soul Calibur. I don't think they're necessarily super important for other games such as like Mortal Kombat or Injustice. I think those games actually rest on their own laurels. But when it comes to Soul Calibur, it's a little bit different of a situation because they actually need the extra push for purchasing power. They actually need people to become maybe acclimated to their story that aren't necessarily acclimated to their story. So you need characters that are going to be a push, right? So people that maybe play SNK, for example, or are only Samurai Showdown is their favorite game, and then they find out that Maru is going to be a character in Soul Calibur. That's going to get those people to be like, hey, well, I want to see how he plays against these characters and go buy the game. Same thing with Geralt from The Witcher 3. Same thing with every single one of the guest characters that they used. It's like a reason for people to come from one game to another and maybe expand on their library of or put Soul Calibur into the library of games that they have, upping that number of sales that they so desperately need. You know, Soul Calibur has sold pretty steadily throughout the years. It's usually somewhere in the 2 million mark. Even with games like Soul Calibur 2, it's around 2.5 million. The lowest being, I believe, Soul Calibur 5, which was around 1.4 million or something like that, 1.5 million. I did a video on the sales before, I can't remember off the top of my head. But when it comes to this, that's the reasoning that they actually choose characters, and they have to actually still pay out licensing fees, and they have to keep those characters in the game based on those licensing fees, and there's a certain duration of how long they can actually have those characters, which is why if you go and you have the, let's say, Xbox 360 version of Soul Calibur 4 and you go on the marketplace while it's still up to try to download Darth Vader, you won't be able to because that character has been delisted because the license has expired. So while you were able to buy the actual game and have the distribution for that, sometimes licenses expire, and that's just is what it is. And with games like Soul Calibur, where they have a limited budget, they want to focus on what's going to bring the most impact for the least amount of money, and sometimes talks go through. That's why with Soul Calibur 3, we had the talks of Dante from Devil May Cry 3, falling through at the last minute. We see this with bigger titles as well, such as Ash and Mortal Kombat 11, but talking about Soul Calibur in particular, we were also supposed to have Cloud Strife at one point. So these talks are so important for bringing over eyes onto the game. Could you imagine if the fan base for Final Fantasy got interested in Soul Calibur, for example, and because Cloud actually showed up in Soul Calibur, they would actually come over and start playing that game. They love it so much, they stay, and then every time Soul Calibur comes out, they buy it. Bada bing, bada boom, we got a new customer that's making the soul of history forever retold, burning forever, right? So that's just how they think, that's how marketing works. But when it comes to the guest characters that I think are important, and it's going by these traditional things, I want to talk about who I would like to see. Let's just go with my top 3. And you saw them on the thumbnail, so it's not that big of a surprise. I didn't want to clickbait people with putting Link and stuff on there when I don't think we're going to get a Nintendo port of the game. But when it comes to the characters I specifically want to see, the number 3 character, or the lowest of the 3, they're all kind of equal in my eyes, but going by the progression of who I want to see the most, we'll start with 3 being, I guess, the least, even though they're all equal. So for me, now that Dead or Alive is actually going to be coming back, it's getting a reboot because Dead or Alive and Ninja Gaiden were kind of not canceled, but they ended their stories and are being rebooted based on the sales of Soul Calibur. based on the sales of Dead or Alive 6. It's a similar situation to what we saw with Soul Calibur 5. It didn't do too great. Fans didn't like it. There was a lot of bad practices in it, so they decided to cut it off, stop it, and we're going to start fresh. So whatever that looks like in the future is what it looks like. But one character I definitely want to see is Ryu Hayabusa. I think he's always been awesome, and he should also have always been a guest character in Soul Calibur. He fits the Shinobi criteria really well. He utilizes a multitude of weapons, which you can actually put all of them into his moveset, or if you're just going to set on one, you can use his katana, or even bring that way of having dual katanas, which he does use, into the game, so we have that awesome hole that's left over from Shura in Soul Calibur 4 filled, and we get that dual katana style that I so desperately want, because a lot of these have to fill those niches of what characters want to utilize in their kits too, right? So I think dual katanas would work out awesome. There's a multitude of weapons that Ryu Hayabusa uses that you can use, but I think the dual katanas is probably like the most iconic for that character in particular, and I think it would lead the most it would be the most beneficial for Creative Soul in Soul Calibur 7 itself, but that's just my opinion. Like, I know other people have their favorite weapons on that. This is just my top 3 list. I'm definitely going to want to hear yours in the comment section, but moving on to the next character that I want to see. The second character that I would like to see is Clive Rosefield from Final Fantasy 16. Now, playing through Final Fantasy 16, I've really grown a great appreciation for Clive. The only thing is I'm not sure if that game is coming out for Xbox or not. It may be, but usually Soul Calibur tends to not actually have characters that are console exclusive in their games themselves, just because of the fact that what happened with Soul Calibur 2 left a bad taste in their mouths with sales and splitting up the fan base. So everyone that bought Soul Calibur on all 3 consoles expected it on the next generation of consoles or the next game to come out on those consoles, and they didn't. They only came out on PlayStation 2 because Sony chose to fund Soul Calibur 3. But that being said, that's literally why they don't use characters that are console exclusive. So I'm not 100% sure about Clive Rosefield, but this is my list, so that's what I'm going to say. I think if you've played Final Fantasy, you know his weapons are awesome. You can either give him his Ultima weapon to make him a boss, or give him his standard weapon, and then when he goes into his soul charge, it changes to his Ultima weapon. I think that would be amazing. If you've played the game, you know that he is somebody who absorbs Guardian forces, and he like has all of their powers and all their attributes, but we can stick with like adult, like middle of the game Clive, where he just has like the Phoenix and Ifrit, or just Ifrit. Spoiler alert, by the way. But I think that would be a really good character to actually have in the game, and his moveset would be awesome, and then the weapon for our Creative Soul characters would give us a multitude of different things. And then this would be a good way for a Creative Soul to work better, because you can actually give him alternate weapons like Cloud or Zack's Buster Sword, or even like Sephiroth's Sword. There's a multitude of ways that you can actually incorporate those characters by creating them in the game, and I think that would be excellent. Now, the last character that I do want to talk about is Nero from Devil May Cry 5. I would say Dante, because he was in talks before, but Dante's kind of been a background-ish character of recently. It seems that the story is more focused on Nero from when Devil May Cry 4 first came out, and Nero does have a little bit more of a interesting move kit than Dante of recent that comes into play with his devil arm and stuff like that. So I don't know if they would actually go with the Devil May Cry 4 version with the devil arm. It's more likely that they would go with the Devil May Cry 5 version, where he's actually utilizing his, like, you know, robotic arm or whatever. But there's a lot of different things that he could do with that. We could call in grapples with it, and then, like, obviously his weapons, like, it's Nero, so we know about his weapon set, right? And then all of that stuff pulled together, which would be super awesome for our Creative Soul characters, and I just think that would be a great addition to the game. But those are my characters that I would want to see in Soul Calibur 7. I want to hear yours in the comment section down below. But before we end the video, it is time to talk about the poll from our last video. And the question that I asked was, what do you think is the likely option for Ishka Oct moveset in Soul Calibur 7? 21% of people said Aswell-like, 10% of people said Soul Calibur moves, 16% of people said Soul Edge moves, and 53% of people said other. You can see the comments on the screen as we're talking about this. This is out of a pool of 156 votes. I did talk about Ishka Oct in my last video, what kind of moveset I would desire for her to have, and what I think she's going to have, so be sure to check that out at the end card of this video. But that's going to do it for today, guys. I want to thank you guys for watching. If you want to bring the conversation in the comment section down below or onto the Discord, that's much appreciated. Any and all thoughts are always welcome. And as I always say, guys, I love it. Thank you.
And thank you.